Hi, everybody. Thanks for either coming here for the first time or for staying over from the last time. And as I promised you last time, if you were here last time, I'm going to tell you the same thing that I did before, which is that I'm Trent, and I run marketing at Harvest, one of the organizations presenting this, along with Impulse and the Abundance Institute and Starshot Capital. Thank you all very much for being here. Big shout out to the year. Oh, thank you. Yeah, sure. Why not? We got time. Big shout out to the year 1986, the year from which you are hearing music throughout all of our breaks. That was the last year that we were under 350 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere, the last time that we were actually safe in this climate situation. And a shout out to the native Ohlone peoples who were here thousands of years before people who look like me were. So why Gigaton Salon? I'm going to treat you like the crowd that you are, which is a bunch of folks who know that we as a species emit 56 gigatons of carbon dioxide and equivalents every year. And if you've done the math recently, you'll also know that we have 68 months left to get that down to zero, which is an alarmingly short period of time considering how bad we are at doing it right now. So we are creatures of distraction, and we're here at Gigaton Salon to really focus on the gigatons. We can make no small plans between now and 2030, 2040, or 2050. Most of us here are climate nerds, and we have to get better at talking to those who are not climate nerds, because most people aren't climate nerds, and people who aren't climate nerds don't like to wallow in really depressing facts all day long. So we're here to focus and we're here to have fun, because if we don't have fun, nobody else is going to have fun in this journey. So YOLO, we're all here, we're all alive. We are very, very lucky to be here in a space-time continuum that allows us to observe the universe. So props to right now, 2024. Worst things have happened. So speaking of worst things have happened, I'm just kidding. Speaking of fun, here is a British woman who is a lot of fun and a very focused person on climate. Her name is Zoe Samuel, and she is a partner at Starshot Capital. Hi, Zoe.
Hello. Hello. Hi. How's everybody doing? All right. Just quick show of hands if you're a founder. If you founded, oh, hello, wave them up higher than that. Some of you are doing this hand. I want to see, like, miss, pick on me. I'm not going to do crowd work or anything. Like, it's not going to be like, you're not going to treat you like hecklers or anything. So yeah, if you were here before, you heard me say that we have very little time to solve this problem, and it's going to be a fact that we will win or lose over the careers of the people in this room. And just because we have very little time doesn't mean we get to have bad manners. As someone who, when I was little, had one of those nannies that looked like the ones that blow away at the beginning of Mary Poppins, I will never be forgiven if I don't thank a couple of people. So I want to say a huge thank you to the Abundance Institute, who I see you like that. Give us a wave from the Abundance Institute, and being abundant, making sure that we live in a world that is prosperous for all. And I want to say a big thank you to Impulse Lab, Impulse Labs, whose amazing office we're in. Thank you to Sam and the Impulse team, some of you whom you can see, and there's Sam over there. And I want to say thank you to everybody from Harvest, and Dr. Jane Melia and the team there. And also, I want to just say thank you also to Systemic Capital, who are here, who are going to be sponsoring a section coming up. And as Trent said, we are all climate nerds, and we may not be cool, but we are going to keep the planet cool. And what I've just illustrated there is a storytelling technique called show, don't tell. When you illustrate something by showing it rather than just informing people, which is that climate communications are often bad. That was a bad joke. Some of you laughed because you're exceptionally nice people. So we're going to talk about climate communications and how they can be better. And my colleague Sam here is dissolving in the front row. So we're going to talk about why are climate communications so terrible on the whole? How can we meet some people who are doing it right? And how can we persuade everybody that saving the only planet we have is a good thing? And with that, I'm going to hand back to Trent to introduce our speakers for the next section. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. So if our last chunk of programming was about load shifting, this chunk is all about climate communications, making them better. And so we're going to hear from a lot of folks who do this at the top of their game. And one of them is very certainly Isaias Hernandez, our next moderator for the next chunk of programming. He is perhaps better known by his moniker Queer Brown Vegan. He is an environmentalist and a creative and so many more things. We're so lucky to have him here at Gigaton Salon today. Isaiah, come on up.
Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for everyone for being here today. I know that a lot of you here are here to learn about climate and solutions, but quick raise of a hands. How many of you have a favorite brand that you buy at a certain store? Raise your hand. Now raise your hand or keep it high if it's sustainable. Okay, well, half of you are failing right now. So we're going to be discussing the importance of building a sustainable brand and why we should be doing that. And our panelist today that we have today is a really good friend of mine. Her name is Kylan Aiken-Irvies, the head of growth at Planet Forward. So please give her an introduction.
Hello.
Hello. It's been a while since we've seen each other. So thank you so much again for being here today, Kylan. First things first, right, is can you kind of tell us more, like for people who are not familiar for your work, well, who are you and what is Planet Forward?
Yeah, well, first of all, hi, everybody. And woo, SF Climate Week, this being our second year, this is so impressive. I'm hyped. I moved to San Francisco from New York, and New York's Climate Week holds it down. So the fact that we're showing up like this makes me proud. And so happy to be with you, Isaiah. So my name's Kylan Aiken-Irvies. I'm the head of growth for Planet Forward. Planet Forward is the leading decarbonization platform for consumer companies. We have set out to solve the climate-related needs of food and beverage, beauty, personal care, fashion, overall the consumer goods industry, which is responsible for about 60% of global emissions as a whole. And some of the things that are, the barriers or the challenges to achieving that are, one, if you're a consumer company, it is probably the case that about 90% of your emissions are in your supply chain or your scope 3, which is oftentimes extremely complex, vast global supply chains, a ton of data that's needed to actually understand where your emissions are coming from and how you can reduce them. So that's challenge number one. And then challenge number two, which we're going to talk about a lot today, is the only way for consumer companies to achieve net zero and achieve their emissions reduction targets is to continue to grow, but to grow by selling more low emissions products. And so they have to innovate to reduce the emissions intensity of their products. So Planet Forward has developed a software solution with two main products today and forever more to come. The first is a automated life cycle assessment product which can measure the cradle to grave impact of consumer goods products across the emissions impact, water, land use, energy. And we've been able to reduce the cost and time of conducting standards line LCAs by about 90%, which is really important for consumer companies to be able to actually incorporate that information into their decision-making processes when they're developing new products. And then the second is a corporate GHG inventory solution, so scope 1, 2, and 3 carbon accounting. But we use that LCA data and our LCA models to power the scope 3 footprinting for consumer companies, meaning that we can better account for everything that they're doing in their supply chains today, whether that be regenerative sourcing or innovative packaging or operational improvements. But then can also model in and use machine learning to determine across your entire company, your entire supply chain, what are all of the emissions reduction opportunities that you have. And then to surface those, make it clearer to sustainability leaders exactly what they should do, why they should do it, and what the potential impact of that would be. So that's what we're up to.
Yeah, and I absolutely love how the industry itself really focuses on this holistic approach, because I think for many of us here that are consumers, like a lot of us just look at what's inside. Like I don't think about the packaging. I don't think about how the LCA models can be shifted to actually care about these things. And, when people talk about sustainable brands, for example, like, I got to actually see one of the very few first brands that you all put out there about moonshot crackers. And by the way, I tasted them, they're very delicious. How did that kind of come to be, and how did that lead to Planet Forward?
Yeah. So I think, this was 5-6 years ago when we launched Moonshot. Julia, the woman that I build alongside, launched Moonshot Snacks. there wasn't a lot of precedent at the time for what a fully climate-friendly brand actually looks like. And whenever it came time to think about trying to guide other brands along that journey, some of the questions that were asked are, okay, what are consumers responding to? What are they interested in? What do retailers want? And how do you do it? And so Moonshot was the first ever fully climate-friendly snack brand. We launched it specifically in food. Food is one of the biggest drivers of global emissions today. About 33% of emissions come from the food system. But what makes me most excited is actually its role in fighting climate change, potentially. So about 37% of the emissions reductions that are available for us to make by 2030 are going to come from shifts to regenerative agriculture, slowing deforestation, improvements in land management practices, so collectively flag emissions, and then another 20% by 2050. So food is just one of those really cool places where huge impact, but also huge potential to improve. But then the question is, how do you take this potential of a solution and turn it into a tangible brand that people can interact with and that ideally can also make money and be viable? So we built Moonshot with those problems in mind. It was a cracker brand that we sold to Patagonia last year, and had a fully regenerative, we made the crackers with fully regeneratively grown wheat, had the shortest possible supply chain, less than 100 miles, dramatically reduced the impact of all of the packaging, and then used every opportunity we could as a brand to tell that story to consumers, whether that was on package and talking about how buying Moonshot is buying into fighting climate change. Or to retailers and getting them involved in the solution by also carrying Moonshot. And it was an exciting journey overall. I think one of the coolest facts I find of the whole process was about 40% of our consumers actually learned about regenerative agriculture from purchasing Moonshot snacks, which is pretty cool. I remember being a little kid, eating cereal every morning and lunch and dinner, and reading my cereal boxes, and usually it was just maps and mazes, right, or whatever, toys. But what if kids were learning about climate solutions by the snacks they take into their lunches and the cereals that they eat for breakfast? So there was everything that was the potential in Moonshot to actually solve climate change in the building of the brand and in the operations of the brand, but also in the stories that were told and taken home.
Yeah, till this day I don't know how to read maps, but my friends
That's
make
what
fun
Google's
of me
for.
Yeah, I gotta read it. But I think it's really cool because I think as a creator myself that influences younger people, trying to market the cracker when I worked with you all was very interesting. I remember I had people saying, "What the heck is a climate change cracker? Like, what are you talking about?" And I think it was very important that a lot of people, maybe their introduction wasn't to learn the education. Some people were like, "Let me just try it out," and they tried it and they're like, "Oh, this is actually delicious." And I think like taste is one of those things that Moonshot was able to do very successfully, which is why obviously Patagonia Provisions acquired it because of its taste, its quality, its ethics, and to showcase that it can be done. And I think that like when we look at consumer use, right, like 60% of global emissions come from consumer use. So that means like for us, in order to get to that gigaton scale reductions, like we need a lot of consumers on board to really understand and to also invest in these brands who have the power to change that. So like who has been your target audience, and also like who hasn't been your target audience yet when you were building out this brand?
Yeah, so I think that it does need to start with the companies first. Hot take, I actually don't think it's fair to expect consumers to drive the change that we need to see. I also think it's pretty crazy to expect that consumers would be somehow more informed and more educated about these topics than the business leaders that get, flown out to every single conference to hear the leading speakers in the world educate them on these issues every single year. So it has to start with the companies, and Planet Forward is focused on changing companies first. So we work with consumer brands across food and bev, we're fashion, beauty, apparel, et cetera, current and coming. And I'd say we see kind of two, I guess, main indicators as to what companies are most ready for this work. Our target audience is everyone, of course, but in building a company and in building a movement and in solving this problem, you have to kind of meet people where they're at, and we'll get everyone on board over time. So I'd say the two things are, one, companies that are most consumer-facing are feeling this heat first. People like you are doing a tremendous job of holding them accountable. You know, information spreads like wildfire on social media now today, and so the more consumer-facing you are, the more pressure you're feeling around doing this work potentially, and that exists across brands of all sizes. And then the second is larger companies, of course. There's now, you know, in California, regulation actually requiring them to disclose emissions and hopefully reduce as well to come along with that. And so we're targeting, you know, maybe 3 years ago, we were targeting first mover companies, sustainably marketed brands. Now we're working with some of the largest enterprise companies in the world. And next, or currently, it's, okay, let's leverage that to start to engage the rest of the supply chains. If we have some really big retailers on board, let's use that purchasing power to encourage their supply chains to do this work as well. If we have some really exciting first movers, sustainably marketed brands, let's make their work extremely visible so that they're putting pressure on their competitors to do the same. And then, you know, when it comes to consumers, I think Planet Forward's theory of change is, let's not expect the consumer to seek out new products and change their lives altogether. It's really not fair, and it's also not realistic considering a lot of people's, you know, actual purchasing power and wallets. But let's change everything on the shelf so that they only have more sustainable options to choose from, and then your worst option is still better than what it was a little while ago.
Yeah, I love that, how you're like reimagining people's to reframe this idea of like, well, if we can't make you buy something sustainable, we're gonna change the whole shelf on there and get rid of all the bad foods that are not good for our health. And you know, there's always this idea with consumers always telling me, they're like, you know, there's you know, sustainability is too expensive, and like, you know, it's not affordable. Why would you push this on me? But like, I'd like for you to kind of like shed some light from like the mass consumer point of view. Is that you found a way to, you know, market these products and other things that you've been building to have accessibility at its price point?
Yeah. So when it comes to the costs, there are real costs related to sustainability, absolutely. I can't underplay that for companies to do this work, whether that be the transition costs of transitioning to regenerative agriculture, or more expensive inputs, or the upfront costs of transitioning to renewable energy. Those are real. Many of them also are cheaper long term, but there are upfront investments certainly that have to be justified. But there's also a lot of cost savings opportunities. I think some of the quick wins that we recommend to brands all the time, you're talking about packaging. Lightweighting packaging, that's a savings opportunity, right? Less packaging, less shipping costs, voila, let's do that. And some other ones for sure. But the biggest cost related to sustainability is actually not becoming sustainable. That's actually the bigger risk today. I think there's a misconception that there's price premiums available to more sustainable brands. Yes, sure, that's true in the same way that like a healthier product might be able to charge more, or Erewhon can charge $20 for a Hailey Bieber smoothie, you know? Like if you market it, maybe they'll pay. But it's actually not the price premium that should be the driver, and it also should be the goal in terms of pushing that onto the consumer. The real value that lies right now is actually in growth opportunity. So I think the BCG put out a report recently that over the next 6 years, $68 billion in purchasing power will be transferring from boomers to millennials and Gen Z, making them the largest purchasing category out of all consumers. And while they're not necessarily going to be paying more for sustainable products, they are going to be favoring sustainable products. And so the upside there is growth potential, meaning more of your products will be sold, more volume will be sold. So over the last 5 years, companies making ESG-related claims have been growing at about 8% more per year than conventional counterparts. So maybe you're not, you know, charging more, but you're doing more volume. And so it's really a growth upside. And that's something that I try to push back on people sometimes, where they're like, you know, is there ROI here? It's not necessarily going to show up in the price of your product, but it will show up in your growth potential.
Wow, I really love that, and I think that's how business should be moving towards that way instead of this traditional models that are sometimes unsustainable. And you kind of mentioned this a little bit briefly with laws. Is like how have passages like SB 253 and SB 261 changed what you focus on Planet Forward? Because I'm sure it helped a lot in some ways.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I am always so proud to be a Californian. I'm born and raised Southern California, and the one thing California does is hold it down. Like we
do.
Right? We've been waiting for the SEC to pass something for forever. California came through, so thank goodness. First of all, so excited about it, but actually it doesn't change anything for us. We built Planet Forward to solve the most critical needs of the consumer industry from the beginning. We've been built with a decarbonization and reduction mindset from day one, which is very different than some of our competitors where maybe reporting was the main goal. And so what it means is that it does make my job look a little bit different. 4 years ago, 5 years ago, our product team was like, tell me what the burning needs are. Tell me what the burning needs are. And I'm like, there are no burning needs. This is aspiration, okay? Like, the only way to get there is to inspire people to want to do it or for it to be the better thing to do. There aren't regulations requiring companies to report their emissions, measure their emissions, disclose their emissions. None of that existed yet. And so what this means now is that it just legitimizes this work. I think sustainability professionals within businesses, I see Eileen and so many other people out here that have been doing this stuff for a long time, and it's really hard work, but I don't know if you'd agree, my background is in ESG and impact investment and private equity. The biggest hurdle in my job was convincing other people who didn't care that it matters. And so what the regulations allow for is basically legitimizing this work, creating the actual budget approvals that are needed to make it happen, making it a priority outside of just a sustainability office, but also for a CFO and a chief compliance officer and a CEO. So the passage of the California laws is just going to help us move faster and hopefully move from this being strictly aspirational work or the best of us doing it to everyone being required to do it.
Yeah, and I think that's to be the set norms for industries since they do have a lot of political power and economic power to change it versus I think consumers have felt a bit disconnected, disempowered at times to be like, I can't do anything. But I think California is a very privileged state where it's like we can be our own country, which is like we should eventually.
We're like the third largest economy in the world.
Yeah, we'll have to succeed.
That is a country.
But I think that's like really great to see the continued progress around that. And but I think what for you tends to work when it comes to real emission reductions. Saying like livable future or like sticks like these discourse regulations that are out there because I think there's sometimes it's really hard to communicate.
Yeah, totally. So, the purpose of today's programming is talking about climate communications and solving that. And solving that in a consumer-facing way is one issue. But again, I think one of the bigger struggles for most companies, at least larger companies, is internal communications. We have most of the solutions that we need in the food industry in particular. We have all of the solutions that we need currently in order to achieve net zero. They exist. We don't have to go invent something. They're already there. It's a matter of scaling them and implementing them. And so in that way, we have a communication and coordination issue. Less than 33% of chief sustainability officers actually report to a CEO, which, there are people who are put on stages, there are people who are put in magazines, there are people whose voices are amplified, but they're not necessarily always empowered internally. And that's actually a huge thing that we need to overcome. So between the carrot and the stick, I think back to the California piece, it legitimizes this work. And then what we actually need is kind of the translation of the value of this work to anyone within an organization to make it clear to them why you need to do it and how. So I think what that looks like for us is helping companies measure their footprint in a way that makes it extremely clear where their largest drivers are today, where their largest opportunities are to reduce, and exactly what they can do to reduce it. Like that piece is really important. You actually need the action item to be able to say, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. This is the potential impact that it's gonna have, and this is the cost of that. And then from there, also empowering people with information about what the ROI of that work is. Is the ROI going to be a function of sales upside and consumer-facing outcomes? Is the ROI actually going to be in 10 years when our investment in the renewable energy investments that we made are going to pay off? And being able to equip sustainability leaders with the plans that they need, and then also the communication tools they need for that to make sense to anyone within their organization.
Yeah, and that's why it's important to like build teams that are collaborative versus like in other industries I've met, sustainability teams, they're like, I don't know who's on the marketing team. I don't know who's on the legal. It's like, wow, you guys don't really like interact with each other. And they're like, no, they're very silent. And I think that needs to change for sure. Greenwashing, quick hot take. Like, how are we doing it in America 2024? Are we losing the game?
I mean, I feel like I should be asking you that. I feel like you're the greenwashing police in the best way. So 2024, greenwashing, I think we're in an interesting place, actually. So carbon neutral claims were outlawed in Europe, and there's been quite a few large lawsuits on large companies related to carbon neutral claims. And I think that has actually created a huge turning point for kind of greenwashing. About 5 years ago, offsetting became really, really popular, and then all of a sudden you saw this flurry of brands marketing green products, marketing sustainable products, marketing carbon neutral brands, and really all that was behind that was like an optional checkout button to maybe purchase a tree that maybe existed or didn't, right? When you really dug under the hood. Not great. And that got cracked down on. And so I guess two things, resulted from that. One, it actually did put a lot of concern into into companies that there's real repercussions for these types of claims, which is scary from a brand side, but also important. And then the second is that I think the excitement around offsetting and the flurry of green claims that resulted from it was, in my opinion, in good faith. Like, people were just excited about having a solution that seemed simple and straightforward. But naturally, the next step that needs to happen from that is thinking deeper about it. Like, what actual impact am I creating? Is this impact actually relevant to the negative impact that my company creates? All of those questions needed to be asked from the beginning, and I think there was some just excitement that welled up around it that resulted in a huge explosion of greenwashing. That now companies have started to take a slower approach, start to reassess their sustainability programs, and have started to think a little bit more critically about what is the impact that my actual company has, and how can I then message more credibly about the solution to that problem. And that's what Planet Forward focuses on. I always say we cannot tell stories that are not reflective of the work that we're doing. And a lot of companies come to us and say, okay, cool, we're ready to do this. Like, what do we get at the end? Like, what stamp do we get? How do we do this? What is the program that we're enrolled in afterwards? What certification is there? And all of those things are important, but we actually take a very different approach at Planet Forward. I say, like, there's actually not a one-size-fits-all approach to this. What we learned from launching Moonshot is that consumers respond best to stories that are authentic to your brand. And that means that it should be rooted in the negative impact that you have today, mitigating that, and then showing proof of the outcomes of that work. And so every single one of the activations with the companies and brands that we work with looks different. And that's really exciting to me. And it's also exciting to the consumers that walk into a Just Salad store and see carbon labeling on all of their menu items. And on Earth Day, we do promotions like having the price of each salad be equivalent to the carbon footprint. And that feels good to people. They're like, oh, interesting. I understand costs. Now I can understand carbon footprint a little bit more. And I also understand why it's better for me to buy the lower footprint one. Or our work with Numi Tea, also doing carbon labeling for all of their products, but also really engaging people around the impacts of coffee versus tea and electric. 50% of the impact of your tea is boiling your water, and people don't think about that ever, but that's something that Numi's kind of opened the conversation around with their consumers, and now their consumers view them as an ally in fighting climate change and an educator and an advisor, and that's a really important role for them to be able to play, specifically related to the places that they can have impact.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think sometimes there's like a disconnection between millennials and Gen Z, where millennials are like, we're doing carbon offsets. And I'm like what's like, you can't really market that. And as someone that used to work in an industry where we did carbon offset, and that was actually legit, we kept being asked that too. It's like, what are you doing more? And as from a Gen Z and as an influencer myself, I always tell brands like in industries, you need to create funds or some types of programs that do support grassroots collectives that help do climate solutions, which that would allow for it. And I think that like a lot of them are sometimes scared to do that because they don't want to be seen as greenwashing. But I said, what's better than doing that than trying to find some fake program that's going to carbon offset on that end? So I really appreciate that. And I think the last question to kind of finish this panel is that, like, as you know, we're still like in current conditions of the continuous economic growth that we have today, and emissions are growing simultaneously. Do you believe like our system of capital is actually offering real pathways towards a livable future, and at the speed of scale that's dictated by the climate crisis, and how the IPCC report and scientists have said that we have to slow down our economy?
Yeah, that's a tough one, 100%. So what I think the reality is, today growth is still the #1 driver for creating shareholder value, and that's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. And so back to the, meeting companies where they're at, also meeting our systems where they are. That means that the only way for companies to achieve net zero, again, is to continue to grow, but to sell more low emissions products, and that requires a lot of innovation. And that's why Planet Forward's focused on reducing the cost and time of conducting life cycle assessments and actually turning that into a decision-making tool for brands so that they can reduce the emissions intensity of their products over time. And we are actually starting, many of our companies are growing in their revenue each year, still continuing to grow. And in certain cases, maybe their emissions have grown as well, but their emissions intensity has dropped, meaning their emissions per dollar of revenue, or their emissions per product, or their emissions per employee. So overall, we're going to try to get to a point where we're achieving absolute reductions, and some companies are, but we also want to think about emissions intensity being an indicator of improvement. And then I think from a more philosophical standpoint on that, we can't let perfection be the enemy of progress, right? And we don't have any time to wait. And so if I were to sit up here and say, yes, capitalism is broken, we have to undo capitalism, and then we will solve climate change, like, we would be sitting here for a long time. And so we can't do that. We have to be able to make as much progress on all cylinders as quickly as we can, and that means working within the current system that we have and getting as far as we can there.
Absolutely. It's like when you read about all the solutions that exist out there and what's preventing it, a lot of it's systemic, but then you realize, well, local elections do matter. Like, I used to be someone when I was younger, I was like, they don't matter. Like, it's going to be the same. But then you realize, like, actually, no, there's a lot of things happening. So I think for consumers out of this conversation is like, these are nuanced, messy conversations that are very continuous. But I think that it's through collaboration, we have to come together. Consumers, brands, influencers, like older people, younger people, like that is the best way forward to build a new business, a new model for society. So thank you so much again for being here.
Absolutely. You're one of my favorite collaborators, always.
Thank you. Oh, now we're going to have a quick commercial break on that end.
Hi, I'm Jane. When my gas furnace died a few years ago, I knew I wanted to build something better without using dirty, expensive fossil fuels. So we built Harvest in our basement. Harvest combines heating and hot water in one all-electric, super-efficient system. Unlike a gas furnace, Harvest knows what time it is. Most people use hot water and heat in the morning and at night. Our heat pump takes energy off the grid in the middle of the day when there's a lot of cheap, clean solar power. Clever. It stores that energy in a hot water tank. Throw our smart pod in the mix, and we call that a smart thermal battery. Harvest takes that heat into your home smartly, all before you have time to say it's chilly in here, because you won't be. What's it boil down to? Plenty of hot water, a crazy comfy home, 30% lower energy costs, 90% fewer emissions. Yeah, 90%. It's time. Time to heat your home, not your home planet.
That was a really good ad. I'm like,
When my skin seeks radiance, but my soul needs cleansing, there's Greenwash, the only soap that washes away the climate change guilt with a gently moisturizing formula that gives me a truly false sense of security, like no other corporation can. Leaving me refreshed, yet entirely complacent. Greenwash from Better. Visit betterclimatestore.com.
those were some amazing ads that I wish show up on my feed these days. But our next panel is about selling gigaton scale reductions to regular people. So our previous panel we talked about from brand to consumer, and now we're gonna be interviewing experts in the industry that are doing it and marketing it and learning from their strategies. So we're gonna start off with our first panelist, Jessica Bergman, the Director of Marketing Communications at New Building Institute on that end. So welcome, give her a round of applause. Our second panelist is Deanna Chang from Head of Marketing at Impulse. You probably saw their ad recently, so please give her a round of applause too. And last but not least, the infamous Trent Wolf, the VP Marketing of Harvest. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. I guess we should get started on that end. Maybe Trent and Deanna can answer both questions. You both are in the business of selling climate tech, and it's a very rising industry and gaining in popularity. But you have different approaches of how you do it through marketing and communication. So I'm very curious, how do you sell this stuff?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it actually, the presenter before this mentioned some of these tactics where our focus really is just building a better product. At the end of the day, we are a climate tech company, but we don't need people to know that first. We're building the best stove ever. That is our first and foremost message. If we build something that people want to use more, the climate stuff comes later. So that's been our focus, focusing on performance, focusing on the user, and just building something that's phenomenal.
And at Harvest, so thanks to everybody again. At Harvest, my goal whenever I'm selling anything about the climate is to sell it to my brother-in-law, who is a contractor in Dallas, Texas, where there are no regulations. He installs HVAC systems all day long at dirt cheap, rock bottom prices, no insulation, and he is extremely skeptical. So my job is, how do I get from where are we right now in a space where we are very much geared towards the consumer who is that sort of bleeding edge, green forward consumer? How do we not use them, but use them as a stepping stone to the next portion of our journey towards making a gigaton scale reduction, as you probably wouldn't be surprised to hear. So it's all about the storytelling between here and there. So right now, our story is very much geared towards those who want to hear the story and who want to hear the climate story. Eventually, like we all know, whether it's Impulse or Harvest or any of the other amazing pieces of climate tech that we've seen deployed at Climate Week and wherever else, those stories eventually have to get to everybody, right? So what channels are they going through? How are they getting targeted? And how do we compel people to understand these really complex charts, right? So many of us in the climate tech industry and climate nerds have these crazy set of statistics and graphs, and no one has any idea what the hell those mean and why they should actually care. So I spend a significant portion of my time translating. I'm not that smart. I just happen to work with people who really are. So a big part of my day is storytelling and translating numbers into sentences. One sentence and one image is the best if you can get there.
Yeah, and I think with marketing, it's about tapping into the psychological psyches of people's minds and knowing the fact that with climate technology, you're creating a relationship with the human. So like these technologies, like from heat pump to stoves, it's like those are very relatable things everyone's grown up with. You don't need to be like, what the heck is that? It's like, no, I know what it is. It's to cook, it's to heat your home. And I think those are things where you look at these bigger technologies, maybe with carbon captures, and you're like, I don't know what that is and how that helps my home, but okay. But I think that it's really good to see that. And, Jess, you've been doing this more for a legacy. I honestly am so honored to be here with you. You've been doing this work for more than 15 years and understanding the climate tech world. And tell me more about your background with the DOE, EPA, and how it's really informed your position today at the New Building Institute.
Thank you. I don't know if you guys can hear me, but I'm Jess Bergman, and I have been doing this work for over 15 years. So I got my start as a precursor to the Mass Save program. And I don't know if anyone here knows Mass Save, but I market energy efficient products and programs. And I started that work as a community organizer, and I fell into community-based social marketing, which is all about partnering marketing best practices with social science, behavior change, and that has really served me well my whole career. And so I've done that with Mass Save, and then DOE Better Buildings Neighborhood Program, and eventually Google, and now New Buildings Institute. But for me, the really important part is we want to quantify. We always look to the data, we try to model it out, but we really need to look to both the behavior science and the marketing best practices and utilize both together to raise the bar when it comes to climate communications.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm very interested to see someone that's from the younger generation, what are the generational differences for each and every one of you that we see in consumerism? Like what channels have worked trying to communicate this? What channels have not worked to communicate it?
Do you want me to go? Okay, so for me, it's always going to be the multi-touch, multi-channel approach. So there's always going to be digital, social, paid, but also earned media is really, really critical here. And whenever I go into a community or whenever it's a product or a program, I look to find who are the formal and informal opinion leaders, and then I anchor on the what's in it for me message to motivate us forward. And so I don't think a lot has actually changed. When I started, I was at an organization that had Obama Girl. I don't know if anyone here remembers Obama Girl, but I feel like she's kind of like an OG influencer. And in my work in community-based social marketing, we've been using people who others trust to send the message across. And so those channels are still the same. I think we're still targeting the millennials, the boomers, that area. And so I think you can still use those stage channels today.
Yeah, I think one thing I'll add, and I think +1 to everything you just said, it's not just about one product or one company, it's about a movement and a brand, it's a lifestyle. We've seen things not work in the past because I think things were too small or the scale was not large enough. And so one thing we think about at Impulse a lot is how do we craft this message that resonates with people beyond just the one product and this one action into this lifestyle that they want to aspire to be and also can have that's actually better. It's not about sacrifice or compromise. And that comes from working across the board, across channels with influencers. You know, for us, it's cooking. So chefs that people are excited about, and just showing up in places that people resonate with and meeting with them where they're at, but also showing them what could be.
Yes, I will pile on a +1, and we're sounding very, very much like our alumnus. But the thing in terms of multi-generational approaches, at Harvest, if you have the buying power within your household to purchase an entirely new HVAC system, and I'm sure is the case with a lot of Jess's work as well, it's just not within reach of the younger generation. So do we, are we compelled to spend money on targeting the 12 to 18 set with ads? Like, definitely not, but I think that for better or for worse, Tesla is always a nice place to look at when it comes to being influential at a larger scale. Namaste, the audio is better now, ish. One of the things that I'm really inspired by is seeing my younger cousins and younger relatives have like a poster of a Tesla Roadster in their room, and they could give two shits about sustainability, right? It's all about performance, all about looking and feeling sexy and having a brand that feels like something that they want to be a part of. And so and the way that relates to what we're doing at Harvest is, again, storytelling, funneling all of that stuff that people ostensibly know that they should care about into ways that they can make change within the context of their home. And we know, I know from personal experience, there are a lot of executives at large Fortune 500 companies who were swayed to work in climate because of kitchen table conversations that they had with their teenagers. So I think direct marketing to a younger generation, probably not worth the direct spend on it. But in terms of the storytelling, like, you can storytell to anybody at any age, and it doesn't have to be that different. Adults are just large children, it turns out, so.
No, yeah, there definitely are, and I realized that older people don't have their lives together. I was like, all right. No, but I think it's important to understand, like, you know, the marketing and like behavioral psychology, but also like some of the data. It's like you were saying, to validate that, is like Gen Z looks for community, aesthetic cultures, but not so much. They may not have the buying power for these types of products, which are more, I wouldn't say higher end, but more ethical, right? You're paying for the products, paying for the people, paying for a better future. And I think that like older generations do have that buying power to change that narrative. You know, my question is, like, you know, what audiences can we focus on to leverage the biggest impact in terms of the actual carbon reduction in the USA? Because I think that when you are talking about climate technologies, right, the word climate or climate change is seen as a turnoff for certain groups. They'll be like, no. But I think that if you say something else, like that squeak over there, I think that would be an interesting way to kind of, like, you know, angle it in your messaging and marketing. So I'd love to know from each and every one of you.
So I think for me, I mean, I think we have to center ourselves in the data and really look at the numbers and look at the adoption rates. I think being in this industry, it's really easy to be like, lighting, we're past that. Energy efficiency, we're past that. This is the new hot thing. But when you actually look at the adoption rates, you realize it's not, there's still a lot of room for us to grow and engage those populations. In the work that I do, which is, again, energy efficient products and programs, weatherization programs, et cetera, really you look at that middle to low income. I think with the economy as it is right now, we're really looking about 50% of the people in the United States would be considered LMI or have a high energy burden. Those are audiences that are usually undersubscribed to these types of programs, and they have not yet adopted. They're in the middle, you know, they're going up towards the duck curve. And so in those times, I always use comfort, health and safety, control, et cetera. Those are the approaches. I think there is a sweet spot for an age range, and I always think about women when I do the marketing, because they do carry a lot of the invisible load. They are a lot of the decision makers, and they need to be factored in. The other part, you were talking about emotional and rational. People are not rational. Even if they say that they care about the cost, when you don't have heat, you know what I mean? Like that, the game changes, and we have to tap into that emotional component and really anchor on it. Saving energy, saving money, it's nice, but it's never the primary motivator. And I think as an industry, we really need to understand that and embrace that.
Yeah, I mean, our product, the price is posted online. It definitely is a premium product. And we kind of have, you know, to to mention Tesla again, taking a page from their book in terms of our first product is on the higher end, but we absolutely intend to make it more accessible as we can scale and on cost down those hardware costs. But also at the end of the day, you know, the government is giving you money to buy these things. And so we are leaning into kind of that civic joy of like, hey, you know, this is, you know, a stove that's about $6,000, but you can save up to 45% thanks to these rebates from the IRA. And so that is a big message that we also want to make sure is accessible for our users and also easy to access for people that want to buy our product. Yeah, and also, I mean, women, big audience. So definitely making sure that we're visible and present in places where people are making decisions to affect their home and make good choices.
And for harvest, I mean, obviously the LMI bracket that Jess was talking about, I always focus on the gigatons, just because it's a thing that I do. And that being the place where we know we need to be to make the most impact really drives me and drives Jane and Pierre, who run Harvest, to try to break as quickly as possible into those really accessible layers of the economy. That means building out products that work at scale. And so we currently have pilots with KB Home, that is the 4th largest home builder in the country. We have pilots with the Association for Energy Affordability in the works. So we're always looking forward to ways to not just sell the thing, but to make it accessible and to show folks who are deploying in multifamily in those LMI communities how we can reach out to them in ways that they don't even know about yet. They don't even know to ask for this product yet. So again, like, where can we be? Where can we show up? I think one of the things I've learned from Jess, and I've learned so much from Jess already, is you can't always just target people on Instagram. Like, there are people who do not do that. I wish I was one of them. But people need to feel things in their hands in terms of paper. They need to be reached out to via phone, heaven forbid, sometime. So I think as we grow and develop and penetrate like these larger swaths of the economy, again, with the idea of reducing emissions as quickly as possible, we have to expand the channels that we go out to as well.
I just wanted to add on to that, if that's okay. And I think it's really important to understand that we have to align with the programs that are already there. I think we function in silos. So I've been in the nonprofit space, the governmental space, the for-profit space with Google, now back to the nonprofit space again, and we're not cross-collaborating. And so it's really important that we're looking where there are utility programs, where there's rebates that are readily available, where there's retail, and also not ignoring the pro channel, and that B2B2C channel I think is really, really critical for people to understand. We rely on them very heavily to promote our products to consumers every single day. They might be great at your HVAC system, but they are not great at marketing. And that's something that I used to do, is go and meet with them all the time, work on their marketing, their positioning, what their pain points were, so that they understood how to talk about it to consumers and how to solve and increase the customer satisfaction, because that's what matters to them. So I think that that part is really critical as well.
I just want to add, I guess, one last thing. Gas stoves, unfortunately, can be kind of political, and so one thing that we've been really careful about is trying to not make using our product political. It's just the better product, and it doesn't matter kind of, you know, where you're coming from. We still want to be in your home, and so it's important to be able to think about messaging and who we can talk to and who, you know, we can work with to make sure this is a neutral, like, marketing approach, because the last thing we want to do is make people feel ostracized or excluded. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I think there's like different variations. Like, technically it's non-political, but then political, because it's like people are like, oh no, the gas industry is losing.
It's wild. People,
right?
I mean, came out of the woodworks to be really one way or the other. So we've learned a lot from that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that there's, you know, the climate tech industry is so vast with its solutions that exist today. And there's so many innovations, right, that we know some of them that existed out there, but so many of them have failed, and they've been presented as true solutions, but instead they are false solutions. I'd love to learn about some of those and why they failed.
I feel like I could tell stories. We could probably talk all day about this, but I think not always the best product wins, and that's just how it is. And I think as an industry, the bar is on the floor when it comes to climate communication, so it's really easy to be really good. in this industry. But I think the really important message for all of you here today who are founders, who are working on this, is to invest in your marketing team, to bring them in from inception, to combine the data, and you have to learn. And the best practices are there. The unicorns are few and far between because this career path primarily hasn't existed. We've had to pave the way for ourselves, but it's critical. It's a critical component of success and how we're going to come together and solve this issue. So to me, it's investment in money and investing it in smart ways. When I was at Google, there was a time where they were like, we should do a blimp. And I was like, that is such a waste of money. I want to see emojis in the subject line. I want to see direct mail pieces. I want to see partnerships with community outreach organizations and billboards and stuff like that. Those were low-cost options that had a tremendous, tremendous impact. The other thing that I would say in general is that I think we're at a really unique time in history where you look to these mainstream media channels and we're talking about heat pumps. I've been in the industry for 15 years, never seen it. And I think the trends also exist on when people care about it, right? It's a great time to talk about demand response when you're coming into summer in places that experience rolling brownouts and blackouts, right? And so I think we really need to tap into that. And so again, investment in money, having a team, trusting your team, and then working cross-functionally and collaboratively to test it out and prove it out and then move it along.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, in the 2010s when we first kind of started seeing this green movement, green tech, a lot of the messaging was framed around sacrifice or saving or, grounded in kind of guilt and shame, which we know is not really the driver of change. And so I think now, that's kind of why I think a lot of those initiatives and products maybe didn't see the light of day or the growth that they should have. And today, it's really about reframing it as exciting and interesting and kind of this raw desire to actually use something that makes your life better. And oh, by the way, it saves the planet. And it's exciting to see the products, like what Harvest is doing, what Impulse is doing, that actually make that true. And so I think those at least are the reasons that, or learnings we've taken to bring in today to the things that we do with marketing.
And I think that in terms of failure is easy to do, unfortunately, in this industry. And it often comes at that differential between engineering talent and creative talent is where I see a lot of the chasm. Because to be quite frank, again, the marketing budget has not been there in a lot of the wonderful startups that I've seen. And that's unfortunate because at Harvest, at Impulse, and in so many of the companies that we work for, they're engineering-led, right? And so it makes sense from an engineering point of view to get a great product out that's performing well, that will perform financially. And it's still, especially if you're into climate, especially if you're a climate nerd and you really care about the numbers, marketing? What? Really? Do we have to? Do we have to? And I think that,
yes.
So
You do.
Jess knows, you have to. And I think that Deanna and I are lucky enough to work at companies that, respect the value of a good story, not just for funsies, but because it really does affect the bottom line. I think it's not, the thing is it's not immediate, right? Sometimes you have to wait a few months. Sometimes the market needs a little bit of, priming the pump, testing the waters, making sure that what you're saying actually resonates with people. And it's not an exact science. Marketing, there's performance marketing, which of course a lot of you know is very dollar for dollar, cost per lead. But there's a lot of it that's just what's in the ether. How are people responding to things? And I think that, my ethos about all this is that human beings are just feelings wrapped in meat, and we can meet the needs of the meat, but we really forget about the feelings quite a bit.
Yeah, no, and I think that there's always, the industry is constantly changing, and it is unfortunate to see how some climate tech startups have gone down just because lack of funding wasn't there. And it's not that they failed, it's the fact that it is a very hard time. I know that I have friends who have climate tech startups and they find it very hard when they're talking to VC funds and other things like that. And one of my, to kind of wrap this panel up, is that we're here in SF Climate Week, and I never would have thought, my first job was actually working at a startup here in San Francisco in 2018, which I had my tech era for a very short-lived period. But I think that it was very interesting to see that now there's this like huge wave of climate tech where I've had a lot of friends get laid off from like Google, Meta. They thought they were protected, and they let them go, and now they're trying
Wait,
to.
what? What are you talking about?
No, they like, we don't. Maybe you know that. Not just kidding. But anyways, I think that it's important for us to kind of validate the fact that now that climate tech is becoming a very popularized field, a lot of people sometimes are looking for advice of like, how do you enter it? I know that my friends are like, I don't understand any of these like terminologies. Can you help me? And I'm like, I mean, you could. There's not that many. I guess it's weird to say. It's like I don't know the path to get into climate tech because I've never done it myself, but communicate with climate tech companies. So what advice would you give to people today trying to get into this industry or trying to evolve to a different industry?
I mean, I guess I'll go first. I fell into climate, and I come from consumer marketing. I was at big tech, some startups, e-commerce, and Sam and I are good friends. And he came to me with this deck that was then poorly made. It's much better now, thanks to my brand work. But he convinced me to join the company, and I mean, there's no place I could imagine being where my work is like, this is what I should be doing, And so I think it's interesting to hear that people, or if people are hesitant about approaching climate, I just say like, you should just try it. I mean, having experience from outside industry and bringing it to climate is probably one of the best things you can do, because the skill sets are transferable, and it's, I think, one of the best things you could ever be working on, frankly. So it's okay if you don't know what load shifting is yet. Hopefully from our talk today, you do know what it means now. But I'm proof you can learn these things and also care deeply about them.
You want me to go? Okay. So for me, I got my start in energy efficiency, and I went to school for marketing, so communication studies, advertising, PR. At Boston University, and I graduated and I got the job in energy efficiency. I was super passionate at the time about deforestation and sustainable corporations. So I got to energy. I was like, this is the least sexy, the least exciting thing I could ever think about. But then I really leaned into it, and I learned a lot about it and became really passionate. And that's really driven me my whole career. And I think it's about inserting yourself and taking that opportunity and seeing where the gaps are. When it comes to marketing in this space, again, the bar is on the floor, so we can only go up from here. And so I would encourage people to really take that chance, reach out. I got to Google because I slid in the DMs of someone in LinkedIn, and that's just how it's done. You have to put yourself out there. And I would also just make a plug for our nonprofit, New Buildings Institute. We have a project called Next Gen, which is where we have trained technology sponsors, students who are underrepresented in the building industry, and it's a 10-week cohort. They're paired with a mentor, and then they come to our Getting to Zero Forum, which is actually a month from now in North Carolina, and that's where they present and network. And so there are organizations that provide an intro, NBI, Work on Climate, a lot of others, and I would encourage anyone who's trying to get into the field to connect with those spaces.
Yeah, I think for me it's just been about caring and then not doing stuff you don't care about. And I speak from a place of extreme privilege of being like a white tech bro, cis guy. So just my, 2 cents. But I think that I've, to the detriment of some points of my career, been completely unable to work on anything else. And I think that I'm kind of a bad salesperson. I just have to feel into things, and if Harvest were not a thing that I really believed in and felt had the opportunity to scale up and make serious impacts, not just on my life, but those of my kid and future generations, then there's no way I could do this job. So I think that those are where the late nights come from. Those are where the, after dinner drink conversations that turn into decks that turn into real things happen. So I think you just have to stick to it, and part of that is having a little bit of a leash in terms of time and money between jobs. And that's hard for a lot of people, again, speaking from a place of privilege, but if you're between jobs, as some of us have found us in recently, as you pointed to, Isaiah, being able to wait for the right thing just a little bit longer than you would otherwise is something that was incredibly valuable to me to be where I am now. So to caring, time and money, the three most important resources in the world.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, yeah, my end, like that's how my former boss, she has a company, now owns another company. It's a climate VC fund, and she actually recruited me to her company because back a few years ago, because she followed me on Instagram, and she's just like, I like what you post. She's like, I don't know if you have the experience, but I'll hire you. And I think it's amazing to say, like, you know, you just never know who's out there. And I think, like, I have such huge responsibility for everyone out there. Is like, put your work out there. You never know who's going to see it, who's going to find it. And I think that's how we all connected. So, yeah, well, thank you so much again for everyone for being here today.
Hey, Zoe.
Hi, thank you. Oh, I'm gonna. Wait, we've got traffic happening here. See, this is why we need mass transit. God, it's just like comedy. See, reusable water thing. So, thank you so much. I don't know if anybody here owns a home, but I certainly would say that the air quality in your home will be so much better once you have an impulse stove and a harvest pod. And what's weird is when you're from where I'm from, the idea that you need to cool your home is quite weird and new and strange, and I'm afraid we're going to have to get used to it. Because it used to be for us, if you're uncomfortable in your home, you're too hot or you're too cold, it's not the end of the world, just put on another sweater. Eventually you start looking like the Michelin Man. But speaking of the end of the world, I'm going to introduce, well, here's sort of what we're here to discuss. I'm here to introduce our next speaker, and I'm very fortunate to get to interview her, which is Stacey Roberts-Steele, who is the managing director of Yellow Dot Studios and executive producer, and which is Adam McKay's non-profit climate media company. And before being there, Stacey was at the Hyperobject Studios, where she co-produced a movie called Don't Look Up that I imagine everybody here has seen, and if you haven't seen it, then you must, because it's incredibly funny, and it's starring Leo DiCaprio, Jennifer Lawrence, Meryl Streep, so, you know, something for everyone. And Stacey also produced the Webby and Abby nominated podcast, Last Movie Ever Made, about the making of Don't Look Up. So have a seat.
I get
This whole sofa, I just feel like this can be like a therapy session. We're just going to get our feelings out about the climate crisis. Thank you so much for being here. Came up from Los Angeles, a city that was not designed with a changing climate in mind. I used to live there. So, Stacey, following the success of Don't Look Up, which was this titanic, juggernaut, you're now managing director of Yellow Dot Studios, where you're working with Adam McKay to challenge climate bullshit. And if you're not following all their social channels, you should be, because the videos are hilarious and they will make you feel better about the end of the world. And we're about to show a video now, which is an episode of a show called Cobalt Energy, which is a Yellow Dot series about the inner workings of an oil company. So if you liked Silicon Valley, but you want to, hate the villains even more, do check it out. So we're going to talk more about Yellow Dot in a moment, but Stacey, could you set up the clip we're about to see for us?
Yes, this is just a typical office comedy, but it happens to revolve around an oil company. So in this one we have Chris Jr. and Bryce, who are the president and VP of Cobalt Energy, interviewing a social media manager, and you can really just see their competence shine in this, I think.
Hey, Chris. This is Cassandra. She's interviewing for social media manager today.
Okay.
Why don't you, Cassandra, have a seat, please.
Where did you say you were from again?
France.
What?
France,
Sorry, what is it?
France.
From the rhyme. I see London.
I see London, I see France.
She has about 2 years of experience prior to this, graduated from...
HSC, it's a business school in Paris.
HSC.
Is it Arabic?
No, it's acronym.
Yeah. Okay, and social media manager is what she was applying for?
Yeah, social media manager.
People really aren't into oil. I don't know if you've noticed this in the scene.
Is there any way we can make oil cool? Maybe
like the Tide Pod Challenge or something like that with oil.
That went
We
viral.
were thinking of selling little oil packets in gas stations. We're talking Instagram.
User-generated content.
I'm talking get JoJo Siwa and Ja Rule in the video.
What about Kanye? Can you get Kanye?
If we could get Clapton, that'd be sick. Concert series?
Yeah.
Okay.
The starting salary is $650,000 a
Yeah.
year for social media manager.
That sounds decent. I could do that.
It's needed.
So just to be clear, you will have to sign a contract stating you will not be in any ethically non-monogamous relationships, non-ethically non-monogamous relationships, open relationships, any polycules, multicules, anything like that. Any LGBT activity of any kind is strictly forbidden. You accept the offer?
Of course, thank you.
That's great.
Great.
Thank you very much.
You do
Thank you for
cocaine?
your time. Sometimes.
All right, let's go. Let's do
Great.
some.
Okay. We're gonna need to just change up the outfit. That's the only
Yeah,
thing. We're just
very
gonna change
shitty
it.
clothes.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, I guess that's what it's like to work at an oil company. Really puts.
It's very accurate.
Yeah, it's really a documentary. Yeah, it puts certain other companies into perspective, naming no names. Although, thank God I've never been treated like that. All right, so if you like that, the Cobalt Energy team will be here later, live. So they'll be on this stage and they'll be telling us all about the future of oil. So we have that lovely treat, and apparently it is a bright future and a warm one. So tell us all about Yellow Dot.
Yes, so Yellow Dot, we are a nonprofit climate media company. What that means is we make funny comedy videos. And it all started, I don't have a background in climate. I started in film and TV many years ago. Did improv and was an actor, some writing, directing, things like that. And then several years ago, I started working with Adam McKay in the capacity of producer. And at one point, I read David Wallace Wells' book, Uninhabitable Earth. And it really freaked me out because I was definitely one of the people that was like, oh, it's 100 years in the future and someone's handling this. And so it really kind of woke me up to what was going on. And then in tandem, that's when Don't Look Up came along. And after making that film, we basically realized that there was a space for short form content around climate that wasn't just this is what you need to be doing, and these are these scientific facts that you might not care about. And so, yeah, we kind of just took what we know how to do, which is entertainment, and tried to mix in the climate crisis.
Which is, very entertaining, although not always in the way we want it to be. So it's funny you mentioned The Uninhabitable Earth, which is a book that got a lot of people into climate, or at least scared the shit out of a lot of people. And it was an unusual thing where it broke out of the climate bubble. It was one of those pieces of climate communication that made it to people who don't care and who aren't climate people. And Don't Look Up is probably the most successful example of that in the world right now. And tell us, how did this film come to be made? Where did the idea come from?
Yeah, the idea came from Adam McKay's brain. You may know him. He did Anchorman, Step Brothers, The Big Short. He's been around the block. And yeah, he one day, we were actually working on Winning Time, which is an HBO series about basketball, so not related. And he was like, I have this idea about a comet headed for Earth. I think it's a really good, satirical version of what's going on. And he was like, I want to go write it right now. I was like, no, you need to stay and direct this television show. And so as soon as he finished, though, he went off to Ireland, which is where he does all of his writing. And he went there for about 3 weeks and wrote the entire film. Wow. And that was in December of 2019. And, within a month, we had Jennifer Lawrence signed on. And then once we had her, everything kind of started to fall into place rather quickly. And had COVID not have happened, we would have had that movie out December of 2020, but it did happen. And so, yeah, that's where it all came from.
Wow, that's amazing. I think that it's such a timely thing, and I hear you had a lot of real scientific consultants. For those who are not familiar with the movie, just to give you the kind of quick summary, basically scientists discover that a comet is going to hit the Earth and wipe out all civilization and all life, and no one cares. And they try and tell the media, and no one cares. They try and tell the government, and no one cares. And people are like, how can we make money from this? And we're for the jobs that the comet is going to create, and just things like that. And so it's sort of an allegorical approach. Tell us about feedback that you've gotten from viewers of this movie, because it's on Netflix, and I think many tens and hundreds of millions of people have seen it and love it.
Yeah, it was the #2 film on Netflix at the time, and so a lot of people watched it. I mean, it was definitely polarizing, though. We had, we had a lot of critics some that did not love it. But what was more important to us is that the science community kind of stepped forward and the media and was just like, thank you. Like, we've been trying to say things like this that no one's listening to, and it's the first time people are actually talking about it. So in a weird way, some of the strife between the two sides of who liked it and who didn't was sort of helpful because it made people start talking about it. And people still reference it now of just when they're talking about what's going on anytime something crazy happens in the news. So
Yeah, I mean, it's better to be, some people's mint choc chip than everybody's vanilla. I think it's especially when something like this, where you want people to be thinking and talking about it. Tell us about the science of the movie.
They didn't Don't Look Up, by the way. That's why they're leaving.
They're looking down. So yeah, tell us. In the movie, Hollywood obviously has a mixed record of scientific accuracy, but since you're an anti-bullshit, Yellow Dot is that part of the mission. Tell us about the science, and you brought in some top consultants.
Yeah, I mean, we had some NASA consultants and things who came in just to make sure everything about the comet specifically was accurate. Because it was COVID, she was on an iPad with a tripod, and we would just move her around, and she'd go talk to Leonardo DiCaprio, and then she'd go over to Jen Lawrence, and it was very surreal and weird. But we also did, we did some testing also after the film came out, and what we found is, because we did tests that were all across the country before everything, and we would actually get to see them. So it was on a Zoom, we would just see an audience, and we just have to take notes when they laughed and things. But we also did some short form videos that we had Jennifer and Leo and various people from the film talking about climate change in relation to the film. So there'd be a little clip, and then they'd talk about it, and they were little short videos. And what we found is when we would show people at the screenings just the film Don't Look Up, it would move the needle a little bit, but kind of with the groups that you thought, people who maybe are already aware of climate change issues and all that sort of stuff. But what was really interesting is when they watched the film and the short form piece, they exponentially were moved to say they would want to take some sort of action. And a lot of them said they became single issue voters based on that. And so that's when we sort of realized that this short form piece to kind of relate to other things and help people break things down was really useful.
Yeah, I think that's great. You're moving people along that climate funnel from your own journey, from, oh, this is a thing, but it's in the future, to, oh, it's really bad and it's now, to, I understand it, to, I can do something about it,
Exactly.
And I must do something, which is amazing. So, we're all here to save the planet and save civilization, and that makes us really good people.
Yes.
And we're right. And
we're all going to do it today.
One thing that everybody hates is a know-it-all who's actually right, it's unforgivable. And so how have we gotten this message so wrong in the past? The climate movement, how have we made it so unpopular to be right about this incredibly important thing?
I think it's I don't think there's necessarily wrong way. There's obviously disinformation campaigns, that's the wrong way. But it feels over the last couple decades especially, it was this is the science, you have to understand the science, or this is what you have to do, this is the sacrifice you have to make, and things like that. And I think at least the approach we come from is that we really just want to entertain people. The first 6 months we had climate groups calling us or doing Zooms with us and things and saying, what's your call to action? Why don't you have a call to action? And we were like, we just want to entertain people and make them even care to have action, So it was sort of an interesting shift. We obviously want people to do something after, but I think a lot of it is, we need to draw people in different ways. And again, because I don't come from climate, we're just doing entertainment, TV and film and stuff. And so that was kind of what we knew, and that's why we did it.
Well, we know Hollywood has moved mountains in the past. In fact, it was Hollywood that popularized the idea that the engagement ring had to be a diamond. Before that, it could be any stone. So hopefully you can popularize some similar ideas that your stove has to be an induction one. So tell us more about the role of comedy in climate storytelling, because this movie is so funny, and all of your other stuff is so funny. It's one of those movies that my whole extended family can agree on at Christmas. It's that good. And so, tell us about making people laugh about this terrible end of the world crisis.
Yeah. I do think. Kind of as I was just saying, I feel like well, actually, not that I feel, it's been tested that when people feel an emotion, they're more likely to take an action on something. And so I think we do comedy because that's primarily what we do, but we've also done some things that are a little more fear-based and a little bit of make you angry, kind of like what's going on with the system. Like we do stuff like that too, and I think that also really moves the needle for people. And like when you look at, you know, a good example is like Modern Family. Like that was a show that was in people's homes every week. You know, my Midwestern parents watched it, and you didn't really realize you were seeing a gay couple on screen every single week, but you started to love them because they were funny and engaging and all that stuff. And then you look back and it's like suddenly marriage equality happened, you know?
Right.
And it's like, it definitely had a piece of it. I'm not saying that Modern Family saved the world, but I think things like that, you know, we notice more and more shift people in a
Right.
way that is not being forced on them.
And before Modern Family, there was Will and Grace.
Will and Grace, exactly,
And,
yeah.
and also, you know, Star Trek famously showed the first
Yep,
interracial
yep,
kiss
yep.
on TV. So there are these things where you see it and then you can be it.
Yes.
Now that you mentioned disinformation, misinformation, obviously, you know, as marvelous as everyone in this room is, we are up against the oil and gas industry and armies of lobbyists. And they've told an awful lot of lies. And I just wanted to ask, if you had a magic wand and you could just debunk one of those lies from every brain of everyone in the world, which one would it be? Would it just be the whole thing or something very specific?
I mean, it would be that we can continue to burn oil, coal, and gas and still live as a planet. I mean, as dark as that is, but it's like, it's true. There's this whole, they're like, oh yeah, we're making electric cars and things, but we're gonna keep making gas cars. You know, we can't do that anymore. I mean, maybe we had that luxury decades ago, but we're at a point now where we really have to completely shift away from that. You know, it's like smoking, you know, it's someone who's smoking and then they get cancer and they go in, the doctor's like, we're gonna do chemo, and it's like, okay, well, you're doing chemo to reduce that, I'm gonna keep smoking. And that's not really the best plan. So I think it's, you know, I hope at some point they shift, because I think they also need to know, like, they're not gonna be making money anymore. It's not a good business.
At some point, like, do they have to decide, do they want to be Netflix or do they want to be Blockbuster? And, you know,
That's a very good point.
They're going to strand a lot of assets. And wouldn't we all like to be Netflix? My goodness. So tell me about, this wasn't a question we discussed, but how optimistic are you? Because Don't Look Up is not the happiest of tales. And a lot of the stories that Yellow Dot is telling, you know, you're calling out some really, at this point, quite evil people. I mean, like, it's easy to say if you went to work at an oil company in 1975, you were trying to feed your family and you're probably a great person. But at this point, there's some actual, like, Rashida earlier mentioned the Koch brothers. Are you still an optimist about the climate crisis? How do you stay optimistic if you are?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not optimistic if we stay where we are right now. And I think there's so many different organizations and places, and there's even legislation coming along. We're trying to change things. But it is scary to look at, like, if we work at this snail's pace, like, that does not make me feel good about things, just to be honest. But I do feel, we started Yellow Dot a year ago, and in this last year, I even feel I have more people around me talking about it. I mean, it's not because I work in climate, but I mean also just like friends of mine and family that are bringing it up. I mean, my Republican mom has talked about climate and wants me to come speak at Drake University in Des Moines. Like, it's just weird things like that where I'm just like, oh, you never cared about this before. So I do have optimism in the sense I think more people are thinking about it, caring about it, and hopefully voting the right way to make some changes.
Well, I have absolutely no comment on that. We're fully nonpartisan here, but
yeah. Oh no, we're a nonprofit. But just vote for climate. That says it all.
Exactly. But I will say, in Australia, of course, climate possibly did swing the last general election there, and there is some data to show that it actually may have swung the last general election here. There are enough climate voters where this is the people's top issue. And as awful as last summer was, a lot of people have become climate voters as a result of it, because when your vacation is ruined, then, you know, suddenly people care. So how can people here today support the Yellow Dot mission?
Well, I mean, I think there's so much that individuals can do to weaken the oil companies' power. But, I mean, honestly, like, the most important thing that we could probably be doing today is for each and every one of us to pledge to no longer sleep with fossil fuel employees.
So just so I'm clear, we're not going to, these people who are screwing the world,
Yeah.
we're not going to screw them anymore.
Exactly. Exactly. We need to hit them where it hurts. No more dating them. No more having sex with them. No more hanky-panky or anything. No more socializing with these people. We need to make them social lepers.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I would just say, like, I think, look, is there anyone who would like to pledge to stop all romantic relationships with oil companies?
Me.
Oh! I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
I said me. I pledge to never again sleep with an oil employee.
Thank you. Thank you. See, that is a support that we need here. That's fantastic. Anyway, so, oh, yes.
I would also like to pledge to never share the warm embrace with a fossil fuel hottie ever.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm having a long-term relationship with Phyllis, who's in HR at ExxonMobil. But today I pledge to stop that.
I am Chris goddamn Cobell Jr., president of motherfucking Cobell Energy. All right? Don't we think it's a bit extreme? All right? A little excessive, huh? Nobody? All right? Here's my promise. Here's my counter. How about we do our efforts as we've been doing them, and then we promise a small fund, a sliver of those profits to go to these scary new green ideas, all right? A very minuscule amount.
Boo that man. No, boo.
No, a minuscule amount to go.
No, you know what? I'm going to say it right here, right now.
Go ahead.
If you don't start putting money into renewable clean energy, then you don't get to put anything into me.
Okay. Well, I hear Jane Fonda has apparently led this pledge, which is, I think possibly her withdrawing herself in this way is more of a threat than me. So, but you know, this is a young and hot crowd, and I'm sure you all have oil executives round the block, swiping right on you. But just on the off chance that there's anyone here who's maybe, like me, an old married, and, this would be the you can't fire me, I quit of pledges. Can we just give you money or something else?
Yes. No, you can take money. You can follow us on We Are Yellow Dot. Yeah, I mean, we're a 501c3, so yeah, we're making lots of things this year, lots of comedy stuff, short form, maybe even some longer form, and yeah, we're open to all ideas too of what you want to hear. So, yeah, thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Stacey, for being here, and thank you all of you who had your I am Spartacus moment. Swipe left on oil. Thank you. And I want to say a big thanks to all of you who are here. We're going to have a bit of a break right now, and then we'll be back soon talking about becoming a climate founder. So enjoy a drink, enjoy some mingling, and we'll see you shortly.